Top to change the screens, but I'm Mark Blauvelt. I welcome everybody here today. We're going to talk about an introduction to getting into catfish tournaments. Most of you probably don't realize this, but catfishing as a sport has grown in leaps and bounds over the last 10 years. It's the fastest growing fishing segment out there. So with that being said, all the time I hear people, how do I get into tournaments? How do I get started? You know, where's information? What could I expect? So I thought, well, this would be a good opportunity to make this kind of slideshow. It's the hard way through the laptop. Okay, who I am? My name's Mark Blauvelt. I'm a longtime tournament person here locally. I live in Dayton. Fished catfish here for 23 years, I think. I was the original founder of the Southwest Ohio Catfish Club. My first tournament was 2002. That says at least 250 tournaments, probably closer to 300. I do anywhere from 20 to 30 tournaments every year. I've fished just about every major watershed in the country, or at least in the eastern eastern U.S. So I have a lot of experience. Out of all those tournaments, sooner or later, somebody gets lucky. Luck will find you sooner or later. That's good tournament advice for you. Anyway, I've taken many top 3 national finishes in big tournaments. Let's see here. I'm the past record holder of the West Virginia Blue Cat state record. I caught that in a tournament out of Gallipolis. So that was right at 60 pounds. It's been broke twice in the last year and a half. So they're getting bigger down there. That's from West Virginia stocking those fish. Let's see, I also have my own guided business. I guide out of here locally in the Ohio River and Southwest Ohio lakes. I'm also going to do a bunch of Sandusky Bay trips this year. Come see me afterwards if you guys have any questions on any of that. Obviously, I'm pro staff for B&M Poles, Boss Cat Hooks, Vicious Line, Smackdown Rod Holders, Spread 'em Planer Boards, Multi-Bar Rod Racks, and River Rats Reel Repair. So usually I forget one of those, that's why I have to read that. So first thing, people are like, where do I even know about tournaments? Where can I find information? Well, social media is a great opportunity. It's a good tool. It can be good and it can be bad, but in this case, finding information is great. You can just, search the internet for catfish tournament and then like East Fork Lake, and you'll see if there's any past references. There may not be one there this year, but you'll see somebody's referenced it in years past. Contact those people and find out if they're doing one there this year. There's many trails in Ohio. I think there's about a dozen trails in Ohio. So there's some of them are lake specific, like St. Mary's has a trail, Hoover Lake has a trail, and then other ones are a range of lakes or a range of areas. So there are several Ohio River trails where they may put in at Tanner's Creek, then maybe at Rising Sun, then maybe at Aberdeen, all along the Ohio River in a general area. So there's no shortage of tournaments. There are several just about every week, all through the year when the season starts, which is usually about the middle to end of March. So, just finding something within an hour or 2 of your house you should be able to find 8 or 10 tournaments this year, easy. They're everywhere because every group is starting up and running tournaments right now. So that's a good opportunity. Let's see here. Local bait shops, especially if they're bigger bait shops, like if you go down near every lake usually has one major bait shop on the lake. If you go in there, if they've ever been catfish tournaments on that lake, they should know at least who to talk to. Get you Facebook. If I was looking for, Cowan Lake, I could just do a search on Facebook for Cowan Lake fishing reports, and then you start. You belong to that group. Every time somebody reports anything from Cowan Lake, you could put a post in there and say, hey, is there ever any catfish lakes or tournaments here? So you can find stuff. That's where social media is very powerful. Lastly, you could get a hold of me. I could get you in touch with the right people. So I want to talk a little bit about terminology in tournaments. So some of these terms are things that you may not be familiar with, but if you're going to start doing tournaments, these are good terms that it's good that you understand, because in the rules it'll say some of this stuff. So it'll say something like, oh, we're going to have a shotgun start. That basically means put your boat in the water, everybody's hanging around the ramp, you know, within 100 yards or so of the ramp, and at 8 a.m., usually, and the standard is whenever the GPS clocks on your fish finder or phone say 8 o'clock, everybody goes. So if they're small club tournaments, that's a great way to go because you only got 8 or 10 boats. You don't have to worry about everybody killing each other. Okay, another thing you'll see is a term called culling, C-U-L-L-I-N-G. It'll say culling is allowed. So what that means is if you're allowed 5 fish and you have 5 fish in your live well and you catch the 6th fish, you are now culling the smallest one out and replacing it with the next biggest fish. So culling is the act of replacing what you have already in your possession with another fish and releasing the fish that you have. Okay, always staying within the laws of the state. We'll talk about that in a little bit too. Sometimes you'll see something where it'll say this is a trailering event. Trailering means that for this tournament, you probably go to the weigh-in ramp and check in, but you can, once they check your live well to make sure you don't already have a bunch of fish in there, you can drive somewhere else on that lake and put in at any ramp you want. And usually if it's a trailering event, it'll say something like, we're gonna skip one, where it says fish till 3, back by 3:30. So that basically means if I put in across the lake at another ramp, I can fish till 3, but I gotta have my boat loaded up and drive back to the weigh-in ramp, and I gotta be there by 3:30. Also, let's say you're on the Ohio River and you're allowed to fish till 3. That means lines in right at 3, or any fish you catch at that time does not count. Usually it means when it says back by 3:30, that means within sight of the ramp, where people know that you're not fishing. That's what that term is. In between those two where it says the limit is 2 overs and 1 under. Most of the states in the Midwest and down south have what they call overs and unders. And so very common, it would say for your team, you're allowed 2 fish over, and in Ohio, the trophy limit is 35 inches per person. You're allowed 1 catfish a day over 35 inches in your possession. So both teams are designed for a 2-person team. So if you have 2 or 3 people, it takes into account that you're each allowed 1 fish over 35 inches in that live well. It can get a little confusing because people will say, well, what if I caught both the fish over 35 inches? Well, in a tournament, that's accepted because the possession could be either person in the team. And the DNR is pretty open with that because they realize we're releasing, almost all catfish tournaments, you're releasing fish alive at the end. Okay? So basically 2 overs for Ohio, Indiana, or Kentucky means I'm allowed 2 fish, 2 big fish, trophy fish, over 35 inches, and I'm allowed 1 fish under 35 inches. So if I had a 34.5 inch under, that would be ideal. Because you want as big an under fish as you can get. And a lot of times tournaments are won by how good an under you have, not the 2 overs. Okay, does that make sense? It's a little confusing, but just so people understand the terminology. Let's see here. This event follows all state and federal rules. Okay, so that's a given. That's going to be on every rule sheet of every tournament you ever sign up for. But what that also means that you don't think about is it means if the Coast Guard does a safety check and they write me a ticket for not having a proper number of life jackets, or my fire extinguisher is now red instead of green, if I get a ticket, I broke a federal rule, I'm automatically disqualified from any tournament. Even though it has nothing to do with fishing, I broke a federal or state law. Okay, it also means technically that some states don't allow you to use crappie or white bass for bait, right? So sometimes people are like, I don't care, I'll use whatever I catch. Okay, so if that's the case, if you went to a polygraph, you might fail a polygraph because in your mind you're thinking, oh crap, I wasn't supposed to use crappies, but we used crappies today for bait. So those are things you don't think about. but those can always catch up to you, and I just want to make sure you're aware that that means more than just fishing rods. Okay? Bump boards. I should have brought one, I didn't have it. Typically it's just a measuring board, so people will refer to a bump board. So what happens is at the beginning of the tournament they may say, oh, here's our bump board that we're going to use to measure fish over 35 inches to make sure that our bump board matches their bump board. Because if I have a fish that's 34 and 7/8 inches and theirs shows it's 35 and a 32nd, I'm going to get disqualified. So you want to make sure that your bump board matches theirs if they give that opportunity. A lot of times they'll let you come in, use their bump board before you weigh that fish. And you may say, oh, that fish is touching the line. If it touches the line, it's an over, because the rules state under that certain number. So, any questions with that? So, in fishing tournaments, people always say, I don't know if my boat's good enough for tournaments, or I don't have, a big boat, or I don't have a huge live well, or anything like that. And those are all good, fair concerns, but I will tell you, every boat will work. You just need to understand that you typically want to make sure you have a live well that you can put fresh water, okay? Even if that means bucketing water into a cooler, this time of year where the water is cold, channel catfish can live all day. You'll have no problem with channel catfish. You get into July or August or September where the water is hot and they require a lot of oxygen or air in the water, then you need to make sure that you at least have bubblers and that you're changing that water out a couple times during the day. So that's important to make sure that those fish are nice and alive when you get back. So sometimes most fancy bass boats or the fancier, bigger boats are all going to have a live well that will have a freshwater fill that's on a timer. So every 10 minutes, for 2 minutes, it'll pump water in and it overflows out. That's good. So you're bringing fresh water in all the time. If they puke something up, it floats, it should go out the drain hole. That's the plan. Things like adding aeration. So if you're using a big cooler for a channel catfish tournament, get a cooler that's as big as a live well, so you can just put bubblers in there. Just make sure that you have a good air stone so that it's dissolving the air as small as possible so that it gets into the water. It doesn't just float to the surface and disappear. Some people use oxygen. I run oxygen in the hottest summer months and add it to the water, and it rejuvenates them. I have a separate air stone and I buy a big 20 size oxygen bottle, is that what they call it, Jim? Anyway, yeah. And I'll turn on oxygen, and it comes out, looks like smoke in the water. It's a very fine air stone. And those fish, man, they'll put their nose right on that thing, and they'll just sit there and they'll just suck it in. And then when you pull them out of the live well, you'll know that they've been on oxygen. They are superhuman, and they will beat you to death. So that's a good thing. Okay, so minimum requirements, making sure you have a quality measuring board, like we just talked about. Having a good digital scale with spare batteries. Because when I'm weighing this fish to that fish, I put them on the scale, and I gotta wait till it locks in, and then I check the other one. I gotta, figure out which one's bigger. In boat tournaments, typically everything is done by weight. Okay, but we'll talk about that here in a minute. Having spare batteries is good because there's nothing worse than you having 10 fish in the boat and you're like, I don't know which one's the biggest because my scale crapped out. If you have any of those digital scales from Walmart, or Bass Pro, or Cabela's, any of those, if you get them wet, they will take a crap on you right away. They are not designed to get wet, even though they say they're water resistant. It never fails. I'll be, trying to find one. And one time in a tournament, I'm like, where's my scale? I'm looking all over, and we're tearing the boat apart. I'm like, where's my damn scale? Can't find it. Finally, at the end of the day, I had bumped it somehow. We had bumped it, had it on the edge, and it went into the live well, and I didn't see it in there. So, things like that can happen. So always have a backup, either it be batteries or a second scale that's better than nothing. Okay. A coing device or a dry board. Okay. So you can buy things that have like a little stringer clip that just has a short little chain, so like a floating ball. And that ball may be green. In which case, I can say, oh, I weighed that fish, put the green clip on him, and I know that he's 2 pounds, 9 ounces. And I'll write that on my dry erase board. Just a way to keep track of what size the fish are, so that when I catch one bigger than 2.9, I just look in the live well for all the little floating balls in there, and I grab the green one, and I scratch that off and replace it with 3 pounds, 9 ounces, whatever the case. Okay, so it's good to have something that's easy for you to find those fish, so you don't have to reweigh all of them every time you're checking one. Because after a while, they all start to look like the same size. And you'll catch a lot of them the same size. And you're looking for 1 ounce here, or ½ ounce, or 2 ounces. That can make all the difference in the world. I can tell you, I have won and lost huge masses of fortunes in tournaments from 1 ounce. Sometimes you're on the winning end of 1 ounce, sometimes you're on the losing end of an ounce, and it's just part of the game. But you want to make sure that you didn't screw up and be like, oh, I threw a fish that was ½ a pound heavier away. I wasn't thinking. And that'll happen. He's laughing. If all you tournament guys have done it, I know. If you haven't, you will. Chad here's the best net man in the world, but I'm sure he's done it once. It's coming. I just jinced you.
Perfect.
He's perfect. Okay, everybody's perfect. All right, so we talked about boat tournaments have those typical rules where they go by weight. If you go to a kayak or a shore tournament, those are done by length only. And you typically have to have a tournament certified bump board to know that people aren't cheating, and because you're taking a picture of that fish on the bump board, and there's already been a bunch of people, busted for having where they made their own bump boards that were not legal size, trying to get more inches out of those fish than what they really were. So you need to make sure that you have a pre-certified bump board. So in a tournament, because you're not keeping those fish, they usually don't have overs and unders because they're not in your possession. You catch them, you release them. So it might be your 3 biggest fish, as opposed to a boat tournament where you're keeping the 2 biggest ones and you have them in your possession. That can be the difference. So if you're a kayak or a shore person and you're in a tournament, you need to make sure you have a good phone, good batteries on the phone, because you take pictures and then you submit them in. So you need to make sure you also have service. So if you're fishing a lake that's got crappy service, you need to make sure as soon as you get back to the ramp and you get with their service that you send them in, because usually by half an hour, Chad, what do you remember? About half an hour after the tournament time is when you have to have stuff sent in. And there are several fishing apps that are designed specifically for the kayakers. Fishing Chaos and a couple other ones out there. So, okay, so what to expect when it comes to like entry fees and things like that. So if I'm at the club level, which is going to be a local lake tournament, I'm probably looking at $50 to $75 per boat. A lot of times there'll be $60 a boat, and that's $50 goes into the prize money, and $10 per boat goes to big fish. That's very common. Okay, sometimes it's more than that. If you're dealing at a regional level for tournaments where you might have 30 to 50 boats, you're probably looking at $100 to $200 entry fee, and entry fee is always per boat. Bigger tournaments allow usually up to 3 people in a boat. So a lot of times you can split that 3 ways and it's not so bad. Of course, if what you win, you might be split 3 ways, so that's something to think about too. Okay, if you get to a national level tournament, most of those are around 300 to 500 per team. Probably looking at 100 to 200 boats. There are several tournaments have like 180 boats. Typically, Rising Sun, just downriver from here, has a tournament the weekend after Labor Day. It typically has about 180 boats. So when you do that, you start getting into big payouts on the money. So that's the trade-off. More people, more money you can win. So that's good. Okay, make sure you understand for each trail, each place that you're going to a tournament. So like I'll fish multiple trails. I'll fish the St. Mary's Trail. I'll fish the Ohio River Trail. There's a trail out of Tanner's Creek. I'll fish that trail. Everybody's got slightly different rules. You better make sure you know how many fish you're allowed to have. Sometimes they're 3, sometimes it's 5, sometimes it's 6. Channel cat tournaments are typically 5 or 6 fish. Ohio River tournaments, normally 3, but some of them have 5. So you just got to make sure when you're there. I know I got burned. I caught 4 fish at a tournament, and I threw the smallest one back, and it was a keep your 5 fish tournament, and I just missed a check. I don't think it made a difference, but boy, I lost sleep over that for not, for what I thought, instead of just looking it up to make sure. Okay, make sure you understand the start and end times. So if they start at 7, that's fine. You fish till 3, but be back maybe by 3:30, like we talked about. That's very common, to give people time to run back from wherever they are, so that you get a full, whatever, 7 or 8 hours in. So make sure you understand when to be back and when you have to stop fishing. Okay? So what time you back and weigh in, that's sort of typical. Make sure you understand the boundaries. If you're on the Ohio River, they may say, this tournament is in the Markland pool only, which means I can't lock down to below Markland date. So I got to make sure I know what the boundaries are. Sometimes a couple tournaments in like Gallipolis on the Ohio River, the Kanawha River goes into West Virginia, and an Ohio fishing license is good up about 10 miles to a bridge, and that's as far as you can go with an Ohio license. Okay, where otherwise people can keep going further. So there's just things you have to make sure you understand where you're going and what's legal and what's not. Okay. Over 20 some years of me doing this, I can tell you the hardest, biggest issue you will have is finding a good partner to fish with. People think, that shouldn't be a problem. I got friends, I got this, I got buddies that all say they'll come fish. Well, that's great until you call them. And they're like, yeah, I'm good. And then the night before, or they don't show up that morning at your house, and you're calling and calling and calling. That will definitely happen. So finding somebody who's reliable. Now that's okay if you call me and let me know you can't do it after you told me you did, and give me a chance. But don't wait till the morning of and call, return my call at 10 a.m. when I'm sitting there. Like, what do I do? So that's it. For me, typically, all the costs for that tournament are split 50-50, even though it's my boat. That doesn't bother me. So entry fee is right down the middle. Anything we win, right down the middle. All the gas costs, right down the middle. Maybe I got to work and I can't chase bait the day before, but my partner can. Okay, great. So it's finding somebody that can help do that. Because if you're the guy always getting bait, which in the catfish world is half a day, usually beforehand, that adds up. And you're like, okay, I always get the bait, I always get everything, So just try to make sure that, you find somebody that is financially able to pay their half. Again, I got a lot of people call me, and I've been ghosted and shorted by many people. They end up on the blacklist. They never get invited to go out again. It just happens. Boats aren't free. We all know that story. So, okay, find somebody who's trustworthy, like we talked about. Part of that means that they're following the rules and not the kind of person that's like, I'm going to bend these rules a little bit. Okay? Finding somebody who thinks like you do when it comes to where should we fish next. Under these conditions, do I want to bump down the center of the river? Do I want to anchor on wood piles? Do I want to drag and troll baits? You want somebody who thinks like you do so that you're not fighting each other. Like, I want to fish this way and he wants to fish that way. And that will happen. No one wants a boat bully. So a boat bully is a term that is used, so I have a boat and my buddy has a boat, but his boat's in the shop. So he says, oh man, I'll fish that tournament with you. And he gets on my boat and he decides he's the captain. And he's like, we should go over here. We should do this. We should do that. And I'm like, well, okay, we'll do that, but let's figure out what we're going to do first. But they'll just bully you because they think they're the captain. And don't get me wrong, I'm good about we'll try my way, then we'll try your way, then we'll try my way, then we'll try your way, you know. But as soon as we try my way, oh, this is no good. I'm like, we haven't even given it a chance. So you'll find people like that, and they just want to control the whole situation. And it happens. So again, I got a handful of those people I fish with that I typically will not fish tournaments with, just because I know. And I'm not saying that I'm always in charge, but at some point you are the captain. You are in charge of that boat and what's going on. So if we win money, my partner, who's the guy that's with me in a lot of these pictures like you'll see, he lives in Nashville, so we'll drive different places and meet, and we'll figure out, because I drove a car 5 hours and he drove a boat and trailer 5 hours, I'll give him an extra $80 for gas so that we both have the same gas cost. We do that, right? But because next time I'll be in my boat and he'll do the same thing with me. But like if we win money and we're always fishing in his boat, I know he's got tires, he's gonna have blowouts. Once a year he's gotta repack his hubs. Tail lights go out all the damn time, right? So I may be like, hey, here's an extra 30 or 40 bucks. Just put it in the boat fund, right? That goes a long way about getting invited back. It's not much, but it's the thought that counts more than anything. So again, any boat will do. You have bass boat, you have john boat, you have canoe, I don't care what you use. But make sure you know that boat's limits. That is your job, not the tournament director's job, because the tournament may say, oh, the river's up, the Ohio River's up 20 feet. We're going. That doesn't mean you should go. It means you better know your capabilities as a captain of that boat and what the boat's capable of, and making sure that you have all your safety stuff. PFD, personal flotation device, make sure you're wearing it in bad conditions. Make sure you have a bilge pump in the back of the boat that actually works, not one that you're praying, why is there water in the boat? I'm clicking it, it's not working. And you better be real careful if that happens. Kill switch, you guys know what I'm talking about? A kill switch is a little red stretchy lanyard. So some states like Tennessee have a law that when the motor is turned on, the big motor, you have to have that attached at all times or you'll get a ticket. Again, that falls back to, you know, in a polygraph, you could fail a polygraph if they asked you that question. Did you put that on every time your motor was on? No, you might fail a polygraph at that point because you did not follow a state or federal law. So those are all important things. I have a wristband on mine, I put it on, and that way if I hit something and I get thrown out of the boat, the motor is not still running. It pulls the cord on it and it immediately shuts down the motor. You guys have all seen the YouTube videos with the boat doing circles, looking to headhunt and kill somebody, right? So that's what you're trying to make sure that we fix. Rods, reels, and lines. As you get into tournaments, it becomes expensive. You're losing tackle, you're losing hooks, weights, sinkers, swivels, floats. Man, it adds up, especially if you're throwing in the crap. You're throwing in the trees, you're throwing in the wood, you're gonna lose equipment. And when you first start, you're like, man, those hooks are costing me a fortune. So what's the first thing you do? You start looking at the eBay, Amazon, Chinese no-name hooks. Well, that's gonna bite you down the road. You know, and I understand because I was there. I did it for a long time. But at some point, you'll realize it's part of the game, losing a lot of tackle. I can't believe the EPA hasn't tracked me down because I probably got 7 or 8 tons of lead down here in Cincinnati on the Ohio River. Sooner or later, they're going to track me down. It's going to be bad because it's just everywhere. So another thing is that my rods and reels, I typically like to have 4 of the same rod or 3 of the same rod. My buddy's got 3 of the same rods. It's pretty typical. You're going to fish with 3 rods each. Some states like Kentucky allow unlimited rods, but a lot of tournaments will say you're allowed 6 per boat, so that's pretty common. So if I have 3 of the exact same rods, I can tell as that fish is biting, I know, when he's got the bait. I don't have to think, let's see here, that's my soft action rod versus my stiff rod right next to it, which one? I want things to be similar so that I'm not thinking about that when the fish buries a rod. And I have to think, wait a minute, which one is that? So if you can get to that point, that's going to help you down the road. Same reels and line, that's harder to do because reels are expensive. You know, a good quality reel, you're looking at $200 to $300. So they add up. You know, you can buy $50 reels and they'll work fine. Buy 3 of them that are similar to start with, and then slowly upgrade them when you get a chance. We'll talk about reels later too. Making sure you trust your equipment. So a lot of times when you start out, people are like, oh, I'm gonna buy these pre-made rigs where they are crimped or they tie their own hooks. If I'm a tournament guy and I have the fish of a lifetime on, and I can tell you I wasn't planning on catching my state record when I caught it. Okay, so when that fish is on, the last thing I want to worry about is, oh crap, is that hook gonna pull out? Is it gonna straighten out? Is the line gonna break? Is that crimp gonna fail? I want to make sure I tied all that so it's on me. I don't want to trust somebody else for losing a fish of a lifetime. This is me, you know, but that's just how I feel. I'm not knocking any of that pre-tied stuff, but get to the point where you know you're doing it and it's you know. I will tell you, before every tournament I put all new leaders on. I don't replace the line, I'll cut it off and, you know, shorten up and tie all new leaders, all brand new hooks. I've got bags of hooks that I've used one time, that when I fun fish I pull hooks out of that. But when I tournament hook, I'm putting brand new hooks on. Make sure the eyelets are good, that there's not sharp edges on them where they're gonna nick or anything like that. Those are all things. Electronics. As you get better in the game, you will have to learn how to read a fish finder. You'll have to understand, you know, what that blob on there means. Is that a pile of trees? Is that a rock? Is that a pile of bait fish in a circle? So you'll have to learn that stuff. You can, you know, you can watch YouTube all you want. There's no other way to learn that other than time on the water. Okay. Understanding things like how your trolling motor works, how to do spot lock, or anchor lock, or how to set it to run at the same speed, cruise control, or autopilot, where it goes, you know, learn the tools. Those tools are all there. You pay fancy money for trolling motors. You better learn to use those tools. They will help you, and they'll give you an advantage over other people who are lazy and did not learn how to do that stuff. So when you're starting out, you learn. Go out and try it. Figure out what that button does. What's it doing? You have to do it. We're all there. I'm still doing it. Let's see. Things like drift socks is a really good tool. You can watch some videos on YouTube about drift socks. It's like a boat anchor. It allows you to drift with the wind, and it slows you down to a certain speed. And that can be really important when you're trying to focus in on fish at different times of year. Okay, lastly, understand having quality rod holders or a T-bar rack, so that, you know, when you hold the rods in the boat, that when a fish hits, he's not going to break it off, go flying in the water. He's not going to break the rod. He's not going to, you know, make sure the drag is set. You know, all these little things that you can do that'll really add up at the end of the day to keep you from losing a fish. Things like planer boards, that's another good tool. Lots of stuff on YouTube to learn about that. All right, keep techniques. We'll talk about this real quick. Keep moving. Right, understanding different catfish techniques. So anchoring on a spot with your boat, right? You know, learning how far to be away. They call it precision anchoring. So that you know, with the fish finder and your trolling motor, you can punch on it and it'll tell you I'm 36 feet from a waypoint, where I put a waypoint on a tree. So I know I'm 36 feet away, so am I going to cast 50 feet out? No, I'm going to be behind it, right? Knowing that when I drop baits, they tend to shift down with the current, down at an angle. So I'm going to start with some short rods and go longer on the side so that they wrap around with the current, and then I'll throw some long rods out. So just little things that you can do that you can get much better. There's a whole lot more to it than just anchoring and sending rods out. Not that we don't do some of that, but a lot of times you want a precision anchor on a piece of structure. Sunken barges are very common here in the Ohio River. They're everywhere. I mean, there's probably 10 within 20 minutes of Cincinnati that I know of. Okay, learning how to use drift socks and side drifting, where your boat drifts sideways with the wind, that's a good tool. I did that for years and won a lot of money doing that. Vertical drifting, so in the summer when the Ohio River, for example, hardly has any current, we just put rods straight over the side and run them to the bottom and crank them up about one crank and just let the boat drift with the wind or the current. That's vertical drifting. But you better be on top of it, because as the bottom goes up and down, you're going to get snagged. So people call it a lazy way of fishing, but it's one of the hardest ways, because you're constantly going up and reeling them down and letting them up so that you're following the contour of the bottom. Dragging and trolling baits, that is really popular right now, especially in the lakes. It allows me to use planer boards and certain rigs, and you're covering water looking for active fish. Maybe tomorrow I'm going up to St. Mary's, taking a couple of buddies I know, and we're going to go out in the middle of the lake and we're going to just let the wind blow us sideways down the lake until we find some fish. And I know that sooner or later I'm going to find some pockets of fish. As soon as I catch some fish, I'm going to waypoint it. We may go for 15 minutes without a bite. I'm going to circle around and come through that area again. But you'll get better at learning these things. Back bouncing and bumping are two more advanced techniques. And again, I would tell you to YouTube these things, watch people, see what they're doing, they'll explain it, and you have to force yourself to learn these techniques. Okay? Make sure the conditions are right, and then go out and do it. Whether you know how to do it or not, act like you think you know how to do it and practice, because that's the only way you'll ever get better. But if you want to be a good angler, you got to learn how to do all of these and figure out when to do each of these techniques. Okay, just like a bass guy. Okay, do I throw a topwater? Do I throw a Ned rig? Do I throw an A rig? Do I throw a crankbait? Do I throw a jerkbait? There's a time and a place for all of those, and the best guys know under what conditions and what time of year those work, and you will slowly get to that point. I can tell you I've been doing this a long time, and sometimes I figure it out, and other times I don't. And that's another thing, as a tournament angler, how long do you keep trying it before you're like, oh, let's switch to something else? Those are all things you'll have to figure out. Best advice, learn one or two local lakes before you tackle big national tournaments. All the time, people want to go to Wheeler Lake because that's where the home of the big catfish are at. And so, all the time, people have in their mind, because they watch all these YouTube videos down on the Tennessee River, that, oh, anybody can go down there and catch an 80-pound blue catfish. Doesn't work like that. You're only seeing these people when they're successful. Yeah, maybe it was their first time and they got lucky and they hit a big fish. Okay, or they went with somebody and they say, oh, I'm going to go down to Wheeler. Oh, we're going to get the big fish. I'm like, well, I've been skunked 20 times on Wheeler. Man, it happens. That's the kind of place where you're fishing for 5 or 6 bites all day long. When you have a place that has big fish, there's not a lot of fish. And so the better the fishery, the harder the fishery it is. But when you get a fish, it could be a better fish, it could be a nice fish. Still small fish in these places. I know I've caught plenty of them. I'm hoping for that big one. But, so those are things. Try to be what they call a one-lake wonder, where you do well at this lake all the time before you start expanding out. But some people say, oh, I've done a few tournaments, I want to do a big tournament so I can experience it. Okay, that's fine. Just know that, if you want to pull the wallet out and just throw money away, you can do it. It's going to help somebody else who's going to win down there. Doesn't mean it's not a good experience. You just need to understand those things. Okay? Success is earned over time by consistent finishes, not you kicking everybody's butt every week. If you place or almost place all the time, I guarantee you, because that's where I fit in. I don't win very often, but I place a lot. Okay, because I've done this a long time. So people respect that because they know consistency goes a long way. So that's what I would tell you. That should be your goal, to be consistent no matter where you go and how you fish. That you can most of the time be competitive and compete. There'll be times you get your butt kicked. It happens. And when it happens, just be like, well, what did I learn from this? Move on. But it stinks, you know, spend a bunch of money, you're getting ready for a big tournament, you go down there, you don't even get a bite. You're like, man, that hurts. You know, but if I go to a place, maybe I didn't place, but I had a good day of fishing and I caught some nice fish and I caught a bunch of fish, and that certainly eases the pain that you didn't place, but you still had a good day of fishing. So no problem there. Number 3, I'd rather be lucky than good. If you don't think that luck is a huge part of tournaments, you are crazy. Because as good as I want to be, I will never beat the guy that's lucky. Okay? So I'm going to repeat that. You will never beat luck, no matter how good you are. And certain people get lucky on little hot streaks, 3, 4, 5 tournaments in a row, man. They're lucky, and there's no question about it. They're lucky. They're hitting the right fish. So just know that when you're fishing, luck comes around to everybody. Just takes time. You may hit a dry spell where you suck something awful, and you question life as a whole. But then all of a sudden you turn it around. Get a slump buster. Go to a lake where you can catch a lot of fish. Go back there, get your mind in the right place when you go back. So those are all things to think about. Crap happens. Learn from the mistakes and misfortunes. So a lot of people are like, oh man, you always do well, blah, 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 blah. And I always tell them, I'm not a better fisherman than anyone in this room. But I do 10 or 12 little things to eliminate something going wrong. And I do it proactively. And then we'll talk about that. Be prepared. A good angler is proactive, not reactive. So I put new line, new leaders, new hooks on, right? That eliminates a bad hook, a nick in the line, right? If I can eliminate 20 bad things from happening, or that could happen, that's going to help my success at the end of the day. So as a good tournament angler will tell you, they're just anal about making sure all these things are done a certain way, because at the end of the day, that's going to help pay off, and it really will. So let's see here. Again, eliminate as many chances for bad things to happen ahead of time. This will help you always. Okay? Pre-fishing, I say, is overrated because I have a job. I cannot spend a week ahead of time for a big tournament pre-fishing. So there was a big tournament down on Pickwick Lake this weekend. There were people there, they've been there all week. They're fishing all week. If I wasn't doing this today, I would have went down there to fish. I would have gotten there last night and just jumped in the boat and went. That's how I roll. You know, but the problem is when you pre-fish for a whole week ahead of time, one, you find fish on Tuesday or Wednesday, and then you make sure they're there every day. You don't keep beating on them. And the problem is down south is just like up here. Rare do we get 3 of the same weather days in a row. Remember that. So whatever I find on Monday, Tuesday, if it was calm, you can bet within 3 days of that, it's going to be windy. You're going to have a cold front come through, right? You live here in the Midwest, so you know what that means. Every Thursday night, you're getting a cold front on Friday night. I mean, it's just guaranteed in the spring. Look, everybody's like nodding their head like, oh yeah, that's some crap, but that's the way it is. So one day, get there half a day ahead of time, search, maybe fish a little bit, get a feeling for, are they on wood, are they on rock, are they on ledges, or, you know, figure out what your plan is, look at the maps, drive over them, but don't fish them. And then on tournament day, either you made the right decision or you didn't. It's that simple. So it kills me because people will pre-fish for 2 weeks ahead of time. I'm like, what are you doing? It's just crazy how people think sometimes. Local lake curse. So I can tell you, if I go to Caesars Creek for a tournament or just a fun fish, I can tell you I got 200 or 300 waypoints on that lake. Every brush pile, every place I caught a big fish, everything. So when I get there and I look at all these waypoints, I have no idea where to start. Versus somebody who just showed up and looked at a map and said, oh, I think the lake's up a couple feet, they're going to be up here in the shallow end, you know. So somebody coming in with a clean bill of thought will often do very well, as opposed to somebody who's local who has 100 places to choose. So we call it the local lake curse. So usually my home lake is where I've always done the worst. because you overthink, you overanalyze, you overdo all this stuff. So, okay, learning to catch your own bait saves time and loads of money. If you guys know what a skipjack is, right? Going rate on a skipjack is $6, $7, $8 for a skipjack. If you can figure out how to catch them and save them, you'll save a fortune. Rarely do I buy bait, and if I do, I make sure it's from a reliable person that I know when they say they're fresh, they really are fresh. So, through my guide business, I also sell bait, so I catch and store shad, freeze shad, and sell shad all day long. Skipjack are coming up here in the next 3 or 4 weeks. You're going to find them below Meldal and Markland Dams. Pretty good. So people, it's a good time if you have a chance, go down there and fun fish, catch 5 or 10 or 20 of them on a good day. Man, keep them on ice, take them home, vacuum seal them, and save you a fortune at the end of the day. In closing, when it comes to reels and hooks, you get what you pay for. Remember I talked earlier about how you start leaning towards cheap hooks because they're cheaper. It'll kill you. It'll kill you. Just bite the bullet. If there's certain things, that you're going to spend a little extra money on, do it on hooks. So I always use this analogy, and that is, if you're a race car driver, what's the most important thing between you and the road? Right? Tires. Right? So the single most important connection between you and the fish is what? It's a hook. Do not go cheap on hooks. I don't care what brand you use. I've used Daiichi hooks for 10 or 12 years. I love them. I have good luck with them. Doesn't mean that you won't. What I would tell you is use a name brand hook. Mustad, Trocar, Gamakatsu, any of the name brand hooks. And if you find one that works good for you and you have good confidence in it, go with it. Right? Just try to be careful with those off-name things. After a tourney, you may go to a tourney and be like, man, I had like the worst day ever, but somebody else probably had the best day ever. So most of the tournament guys, you can go up to after a tournament and BS with them. Don't ask where they fished. Say, what type of water did you fish? How deep? And what made you fish there? Most of the guys, some guys are idiots, but most guys after the tournament will tell you exactly what and why. They're not going to say where, like I was on that bend. There's don't ask that. It's all in how you approach them, and they'll tell you the hints. And you better take notes and figure it out, because on that day in those conditions, apparently that's what was working. Practice, practice, practice. Force yourself to learn those new techniques. For years, bumping is a technique, and we don't have a lot of current down here other than in the spring. And I had to force myself to learn how to do it. I can't tell you how many trips I went to the Mississippi River where they have constant current. And I struggled until I got better at it. And I get a little better. You catch a fish and you boost your confidence, and you catch another fish and you get a little better at it. A little better, and you just, every day is a new day. So don't be afraid, but you have got to pay your dues to get good at these things. You cannot just watch them on YouTube and say, oh, I know how to do that. It just doesn't work like that. Fish with as many different folks as you can early on. So if you have an opportunity to fish with if you're new in tournaments and some guy offers to take you out, man, you better jump on that and be like, yeah, I'd love to do that, man. See what you're doing, learn little tips and little tricks, and you fish with a bunch of different people, and before long you develop your own system of how you'll do things by oh, I like what that guy did, and I like what that guy did, and I like what he did, and before long those are good. Don't be afraid to be like, hey man, I'll fill your gas up, I'll pay for it, take me out sometime, just show me something, teach me something. When I was starting out, there were several guys who were very good to me. They would throw me a bone. They wouldn't give it to me, they just throw me a bone. And I had to be like, okay, all right, he's trying to tell me something here. I need to figure out what he's trying to tell me. And sure enough, so those guys, they never spoon-fed it to me. They made me work for it, but they gave me enough information to make me go do what I was trying to do, figure things out. Time on the water trumps watching it on YouTube. That makes sense. Social media can be your friend or your enemy. And I say that because it's easy to be like we talked about. You see on YouTube, everybody goes to Wheeler and they got an 80 pounder, and in your mind, you're like, oh man, there must be thousands of 80 pounders down there. It doesn't work that way. What you didn't see was the 50 trips before then that they never caught a fish or anything like that. So those are all things. You just need to understand, on YouTube, you're seeing successes. You're not seeing failures. And a few of the guys, they'll tell you, hey, we struggled here, we had a tough time, but we finally got a good fish. So those are the guys you want to respect. There's plenty of good guys on YouTube. Chris Souders, Steve Douglas, old videos from Steve Douglas are really good. River Lunacy, there's Hagen Grubbs is very good. And there's most of the local guys. Chad, what's your channel, Chad?
Fields to Water.
Fields to Water, right? Mr. Chadwick Fields there. Very good information. I think we're getting real close here. I'm going to keep moving here real quick. Morals and ethics. Don't be part of the problem. In tournaments, it's easy to see somebody fish in a spot and want to move over there. Don't be that guy. If you're one spot that you had picked out and there's somebody already there, go somewhere else. Figure it out. That's what I'm going to tell you. Don't be the problem. And there's a lot of YouTube guys and this new generation, I hate to say that. There's a younger generation that has this entitlement generation, and the people are out there. And as soon as they see it, man, here they come. And you're like, what are you doing? You know, I'll just say, don't be the problem. Right? Try to stay drama free when you're online. If you're looking for sponsors, that's a big one. Make sure that you're careful with your political posts, any racist, any of that kind of stuff. You need to be very careful. Just like a job, I was a recruiter for years. We looked at everybody's Facebook pages, right? I mean, that's the first thing you did when we considered somebody, just to get a feel. You know, how are they? Are they middle of the road, or are they going to be that person that's causing problems? So those are things. Take your wife or kids fishing. Many of the teams, right, husband and wife right here, you know, in the back, right, Josh, right? They fish. There's a bunch of people fish with their kids in tournaments. It's a good way to spend time with your kids and your wife. There's a bunch of teams out there that are husband and wife, even at the national level, or with their kids. Relax, have fun, teach others, and enjoy the day of fishing. That's the most important thing, right? Okay.